Hello everyone, and welcome to this BISLM webinar, the seventh and final session in our series for this year. In this session, Andy's co-presenting with Dr. John Taylor from Cranley Schools in the UK and Rob George, who's currently based at Nexus International School in Malaysia. And as always, our participating members bring plenty of gems and insights to share as well. John and Rob offer fantastic perspectives on project-based learning, particularly around the EPQ and how it compares to the IB extended essay, drawing on years of valuable experience in doing so. We'd also like to extend our thanks to Pedro Afonso, Head of Libraries at Markham College in Peru, who contributed to the afternoon session. As you know, we run 2 sessions to accommodate the different time zones. Pedro also generously has provided resources we'll be sharing with you all. And we're really grateful for that. It perfectly reflects one of the greatest strengths of this network, the spirit of collaboration and sharing that continues to grow across our schools. This was actually a really practical and useful session with plenty of takeaways, especially for those supporting independent research in both IB and A-level settings. I hope you find it useful.
Good morning and good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this next BSILN session on libraries, the extended essay, and the EPQ. It's my great pleasure to introduce a number of people today and to welcome back members who have attended quite a few of our sessions in the past. But first of all, I'd like to introduce Dr. John Taylor from Cranley Schools, and he is based in the UK, just outside of London. And Rob George, who at the moment is at Nexus International School in Putrajaya in Malaysia. John, would you just like to introduce yourself a little bit and tell us about the work you've done with the EPQ and at Cranley?
Yes, thanks, Andy. Yes, as Andy says, I'm Director of Learning, Teaching and Innovation at Cranley School. And I have a very close association with the Extended Project. I'm often introduced as the inventor of it, which is a title I feel slightly coy about claiming, because obviously nothing like this is ever one person's idea. But it's fair to say I was one of the principal developers of the early pilot version, Perspectives on Science course, that we put together about 20 years ago. And I played a significant role in development of the qualification nationally and internationally.
Great to have you here today. And I think this is an opportunity for people who are doing the extended essay and the IB diploma to learn a little bit more about the EPQ. But I think the principles hold the same in terms of we're looking at how libraries can extend their help to this project-based learning, which is so important for these kids. And the other person who's really helped me put this together today is Rob George, and he is at Putrajaya in Malaysia. Rob, just tell us a little bit about your association with the EPQ and how you worked with it in the various schools that you've been at.
Sure. I mean, I've been a teacher I was a physics teacher before, but I've been a teacher librarian since 2005. And it was really when I joined Alice Smith School as head of libraries in 2010 that I sort of had my first real into work with EP. I think the thing which was the biggest change in the way we operated is the way that we selected the supervisors. Like a lot of schools, we were originally choosing subject specialists to support, but we then we flipped around to develop a full-time sort of departmental team of research specialists. And in some ways, I think for us, that was the thing which improved our support for the students and for the delivery of EPQ. So over the years, and I think we got better and better because of that mechanism. I think the fact that we were a consistent group, that we were focused on research rather than on specific subject, meant that we knew how to, without doing anything that was breaking the rules, but we steered the students so successfully to a great result.
That's great, Rob. Thanks very much indeed. I put together this very short slide deck. And somehow I came up with all the C's: content, context, calendar, blah, blah, blah. So that's what we're going to be looking at this morning. Please do jump in with any comments, questions in the chat box. And as we go through, we'd love to have your experiences to add to what Rob and John are going to say this morning. So we'll start with context. And for context, I put together a short slide. I started thinking about year 12s and 13s, grades 11 and 12 themselves. And I came up with this word paradox. In many ways, they're at the pinnacle of learning. They've been in school for over 10 years, but they're going on to do something really quite new, quite challenging. And it's a big step up from year 11 or grade 10. The expectations are greater. They've got to bear in mind not only what they're going to be learning, but getting into university, getting into college. So there's this somewhat daunting pre-U agenda, and there's conflicting ideas running around in their minds. They want to be independent, and yet they have sometimes a fear of independence, an uncertainty. Some will cope better than others. A few of them will only have just joined the school, and therefore, when you look at this mix, although most of them have been in the school for some time, there is a need for differentiated support, and that will mean that they will be looking to other people. And I think the library is one of the areas where they typically look to for the extended essay and for the EPQ. This isn't always a steady sort of process for them. And sometimes they will have setbacks, sometimes they go forward. But Rob, can I just ask you first, this characterization of the year 12 and 13, is this a persona that you recognize as you were in the library and helping kids with the EPQ?
I think it's very easy to make too many assumptions as to how much they are going, or at least how easy they're going to find it to start a project like this. I think this is something philosophically that John will have much more experience in. But for me, I mean, I think there's something that our chief coordinator always pressed on us. Well, not coordinator, our the exam moderator pressed on us, was that whilst we were using the course for our year 12 students, that it is an A2 level course. And that means that even though they were coming out of Key Stage 4, probably having very little experience of any real academic writing, to have virtually no experience of writing anything more than a two-side essay, so let's say 2,000 words max, what we're coming through to is something that is really very, very alien to them. And not only that, the expectation that we were having, and I don't know how many of you are using EPQ with year 12s, but the expectation is that they are going to be achieving at the level of a good year 13 student. So that in itself is a massive challenge. And I think that means that we do actually need, in an appropriate way, to actually shepherd them through the process very carefully and and we need to work hard to make a success of it for them.
So interestingly, you did it in year 12, which is grade 11. John, what year do your students do the EPQ?
Yes, we're the same as Rob. Largely, we used to run it in practice at both years of the sixth form, 12, 13, grade 11, grade 12. But we found around about 2017, when coursework was reintroduced, there was just too much pressure on the second year of the sixth form. Their focus is on their UCAS process and so on, mocks, rehearsal exams. So we put it all into year 12. We lost something perhaps a little bit there, because it's nice to have the more expansive program. But there's no doubt that they prefer the more focused timescale. Interestingly, having said that, I'm actually getting students in other year groups now, older, so some who do come back to EPQ in the upper sixth, the final year with us, and even some younger students who are having a go at it. So it's never, with EPQ, it's never one size fits all. There's always flexibility around the edges. But yes, our core program is year 12.
Interesting. Jane, just remind us, are you an EPQ school or are you an IB extended essay?
Our school does IGCSEs up until year 11. We have a 3-year IGCSE program, but they changed to the DP program for the final 2 years. So they're doing the extended essay, but our students do they complete their essay in it's changed. I don't know. I think they do. They get it finished in year 12 as well, and get it off their plates. So I'm not quite sure with this, because the extended essay program is changing next year, whether that's going to be under review, and whether they're going to go back to doing it across the 2 years.
Thanks very much, Jane. And Olive in Uganda there. What about yourselves? What's the rhythm of the kids doing the extended essay in your school?
It's introduced to them in year 12 usually, and they go through with it across year 13, a little bit of year 13. This year, the year 12s were introduced to the extended essay, and by March, they are expected to have finished with it completely. By March next year, which will be their first term in DP2, yes, in year 13.
So, okay, you spread it out a little bit more. What about Rebel? What are you doing, Rebel? Are you doing EPQ or extended essay? Not quite sure she's there at the moment. Never mind. We'll move on.
And Andy, in terms of with that, I mean, Nexus is a IBDP program school.
Yes.
And although I'm not specifically involved with the EE at the school at the moment, that they are using, we're very similar to Olive, that we're using what is primarily like a 4-term program, where they start at the beginning of year 12 and they spill over into year 13. And as Olive said, nearly completely finish with the EE by the end of term 1, but probably spilling a little over into term 2.
Interesting. Thanks, Rob. What I'm drawing in from you all is, they're new to this sort of stuff, and especially if they're doing it in year 12, grade 11, it is a big step up and it is a big ask. But Rob, as you said, you've been able to, I think all of you have been able to get into a situation where they're coping very successfully in that first year and a bit of year 12 and 13 and taking it forward. But let's just have a quick look at something that I've used over the years to characterize the need for scaffolding in the way that we support these kids. And we call it the learning wedge. And let's just look at year 12 and 13 as a whole 2-year period. It's really an 18-month period at most. And if we say they're starting at the beginning of year 12, grade 11, and going on into year 13, at the beginning of year 12, there will be more doubt about what they're doing. But as you get to work with them, as their teachers work with them in the various subject areas, as the EPQ and EE goes on, their confidence builds. So you have this growth of confidence here, and hopefully some of that doubt will wear away, and they'll get into the rhythm of it. And by the time they are doing their final exams, of course, they're on their own in the exam hall. And if we translate that little model there into what they're actually doing at the beginning, so much. At the beginning, it's all new learning, and then as you get into it, you'll go over the stuff that you've got, and revision will creep in, and it'll be much more revision towards the end. And if you also look at making that student-centered as well, they're more dependent in the early part of this 2-year course, and they become increasingly independent. And if we translate that into their needs from teachers and from coordinators and from librarians, there'll be more of a need for scaffolding learning as they start, which will become less and less as they become more independent learning. They start making connections to what they have done in the past and what they're doing now, and they will be in a position to do well, as you've described, both in their project-based learning and in their exams. Jane, is that a model that you kind of recognise?
It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's an excellent model, I think. Yeah, that definitely is what happens with them. And I think also their maturity and their ability to think conceptually also increases, and I guess adds to that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And if you're teaching them in the same way if you're teaching them in the same way at the beginning of that period as you are at the end, well, something's going wrong. So your teaching develops as they develop as students, and you can ask them to do so much more. So that makes sense to you, Jane. John, what about yourself?
It's very similar. I mean, I think I once quipped about, in an article I wrote about, the question, would you or would you not send your son or daughter or recommend to a friend that they go to the independent learning school of driving? The point being, that you can imagine two different ways of interpreting independent learning. This sort of classic model of just let the kids take charge, let them do what they want, which obviously wouldn't be a great way to teach anybody to drive, and probably not a great way to teach anything. But on the other hand, of course, the whole point of learning to drive is to learn to become independent. And so Andy's wedge model, or I've called it facilitated discovery or guided independence. There's lots of different phrases we can use. I think that's exactly the right model. I mean, one of the I'm sure it's the same in extended essay. One of the great joys is at the end of the course, when they're presenting their work with EPQ, they have to do a final presentation to their mentor. It's a great joy just to discover how much they've learned. And it's a joy for us, the teachers, the mentors, the supporters, but it's also a joy for the learners, because it's very powerful when they realise that they become if you like, a mini expert, and that there's a part of the intellectual terrain over which they can claim some ownership rights, that they know more probably about that topic than you do, and that's very empowering, and it has an impact, I think, on their sense of themselves. So I think it's very powerful, and so I'm really, it's a model I would definitely endorse.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, one of the arguments I've always used for adopting this model is that it's not only great for them academically, it not only prepares them for the next stage of their learning, but as they've been helped through and then let go, they become increasingly confident. And you see on the left-hand side, the confidence for me is so important. And to be quite frank, confidence to me is one of the great things that will address any kind of issue with well-being. If a child is confident, their well-being is being addressed, motivated, self-possessed, and self-aware. Jane, do you think that's something that you see?
Yeah, that's definitely the case. If they're feeling they're doing well, it just builds for them.
And if they get those skills and they can do the things that you're asking them to do, which are very challenging and could be seemingly daunting at the beginning of year 12, grade 11, then when they look back, it's an exercise I quite like to do. Okay, what can you do now that you couldn't do 2 years ago? What would you attempt now that you wouldn't dream of attempting 2 years ago? And getting them to look back down at the mountain that they've climbed, as well as looking up to the peak of their university application and their exams, I think is something that we can all do to help them with. Let's move on. John, sorry.
Because I think you hit that point about confidence is so important, and I agree. And in fact, there have been now, I think over the last 10 or so years, there have been a series of academic studies of the extended project, but also the extended essay and other level 3 programs which develop similar skills. And the findings are quite impressive, really, when you look at what the research data shows. It's quite clear that students who perform well in things like this do better in their other studies. They have a higher chance of getting access to a competitive university. They have a higher chance when they're at university of a high-class degree. And there is some evidence as well that with the extended project, an improved performance in that correlates with an improved performance in that of the A-levels. So there's an interesting, of course, it's always difficult, causation and correlation. It's always difficult to know, is that because more able students choose these courses? There is some hints in the data that it's not just that, actually. And certainly, based on what Andy's saying, I think the point about confidence and the learner's awareness that they can actually learn for themselves, that if they're carefully guided and given the right scaffolding, independent learning actually works for them. That I think is what can unlock a door. And the other element to it, of course, is that sometimes it's the empowerment that comes from choice. Because of course, with the extended essay and certainly with EPQ, you have a greater range of choice about the topic and direction that you're going to take things. And again, realizing that you can actually discover something and find it interesting and rewarding and worthy of further study is very powerful as well, I think, for learners. And sometimes it's been the case with EPQ that they've got into a topic, they've enjoyed it so much, it's then either suggested to them an avenue for further study or given them greater confidence when they go down a route they might not otherwise have done, because maybe it's their extended project was the one thing that opened that door for them. So,
absolutely. Rob?
Yes, I mean, certainly we were aware of the whole confidence and new learning and independence and scaffolding and I think the way that we tried to support that at Alice Smith School was in addition to the taught element, we had a timetabled single lesson a week where, and as I said, we had specialist supervisors. So each supervisor would have usually 4 to 6 EPQ students in their group. And we had a timetabled lesson each week where we would be present and the students would come along. And that was an opportunity to work through this whole spectrum from doubt to confidence, from new learning to being, to being capable, from being dependent to independent. And it was interesting to watch during the course of the year how much less we needed to help the students through what they were doing and actually just be there as a sounding board for them.
So
Thanks,
Rob,
Rob.
I just ask, in terms of you didn't use teachers with a specialization in the subject that the kids were writing their EPQ on, so they didn't know about the actual topic. I guess I like your idea, because we really struggle to get enough supervisors, and if we did make those ones that are really keen and would like to have a bigger number, but I guess we've been restricted by trying to give the kids a supervisor in the subject area that they're writing, and this is the extended essay. But how did you deal then with that, with the supervisors not having the subject understanding?
To be honest, Jane, I don't think that it is as important as people imagine to be a subject specialist.
I never thought of it.
I actually think the most important thing for a supervisor is to be a specialist in research. And we would always, and again, within the rules of the game, we would always, as supervisors, if we were being asked subject-specific questions, which was too far out of the comfort zone to support, then we allowed students to actually make contact with appropriate teachers and record. And when I say record, I don't mean audio record, but record the interaction with the teacher and how that helped them move themselves forward.
I think it's a great idea. I'm going to suggest it to our extended essay coordinator, because our school just keeps growing and growing, and the problem just gets bigger all the time and a bigger headache for her. That sounds like a great solution. And as you say, then the teachers who are doing that supervision are the ones who want to do it, not the ones who have been made do it. And obviously that doesn't often go well.
It's interesting, Jane, because what I've been picking up in doing the research for this seems to be a bit of a differing point between EE and EPQ. I think EPQ schools are very confident in doing this and have been doing it for some time. And IB schools tend to go with the subject specialism. And I think in a way, from my perspective, it's the difference between a subject-centered approach and a student-centered approach. If you understand learning, as Rob said, if you understand research, you can do this. You can facilitate. You know when the kids are being really confident in bringing back evidence to justify their positions. I remember going into Group 4 project presentations. I didn't know a thing about science, nothing. Or listening to the kids talking about their artwork in the exhibitions. I knew when the kid was confident. I knew when they knew what they were talking about and could explain themselves. And I would think this is a really, if nothing else comes from this, something that will spark discussion at EE schools and IB schools as a result.
Yeah. Oh, it certainly will for me, because I'm now thinking about, I teach theory of knowledge, and I teach all the areas of knowledge, but I'm not a specialist in it. But I know when I read their essays, and I might be reading, an essay that's focusing on, maths and natural science, but I know whether it's a good essay, and I'm not a specialist in that subject. So I don't know why we haven't thought about doing what Rob's doing. It's brilliant. Yeah.
And Jane, the other thing which is so important is that means that the supervisors, yes, we are super enthusiastic, because of course it's our thing, but over and above that, we know the EPQ process inside out in a way that a subject teacher just doing their best to be a supervisor can't possibly know.
No, and if they're just doing it for 1 year and they're out, there's no kind of incentive to really understand the process properly. And but what about then of course those teachers have got a big load. Is there a balance then in their timetabling, or how do you actually get the teachers who do like doing it to do it? How do you compensate, I guess, for what they're doing?
So for people who were classroom teachers, and it didn't apply to me so much as head of libraries, but for the people who were classroom teachers who were being those EPQ specialists or research specialists, we had one lesson on our timetable for the lesson I mentioned where we actually sat down with the students, but that was just in support of them. That was not part of the taught element, but the people were also given one more timetabled lesson allowance for being an EPQ supervisor.
Okay. That's good.
I think that's really important. When you are in the business like I was of putting timetables together and getting standard loads together, that makes sense. And it goes back to the sort of the deep structures of the school, and which are often unseen, which will support something really quite potentially change-worthy, revolutionary even, to get going. So there's something to take to your SLT, Jane.
Definitely. I'm definitely going to do that. Yeah, fantastic.
And Jane, something else that you can often get buy-in, and I wasn't the EPQ supervisor, but you often get buy-in from school leadership wanting to be involved as those EP research specialists, and that's not too expensive from a timetable point of view.
No, it's not, is it? But then they've got that hands-on contact with the kids, which is so important to their roles, understanding what's happening in that regard. So yeah, that's enough. I'll keep that idea as well. Thank you.
We're talking about politics here as well, which is great. I think getting heads of school, getting deputy heads involved in this, spot on. We lost you, Olive, for a little bit there, and you've come back at a very interesting point, because we were discussing the difference between extended essay supervision and EPQ supervision, and extended essays tend to be supervised by specialists in their subject, whatever the kids were doing, whereas EPQ, you can have anybody supervising something, and people in Rob's school were tending to become specialist supervisors for EPQ because they were experts in research. What happens in your school, Olive? Do subject specialists tend to supervise the essays?
Yes. Like you've said, it's a subject specialist. If a child or children are doing an EE in physics, it's usually a physics teacher who does that. And if it's maybe digital societies, it's usually the teacher who's the specialist in the subject who does that also. So it's, yes, definitely the subject specialists are the ones who are picking on the subjects. But I think the IB allows for anybody to be able to supervise that. I stand to be corrected.
I will be very interested in following this up with Pedro this afternoon and find out what he does. And well, I know what he does at their school. I'm pretty sure it's subject specialists supervising the EE. And maybe this is the start of shaking something up. Who knows? I think we better go on. Interesting point though this is, and let's have a quick look at some of the content that you as librarians are asked to look for, because the library is relevant to every project. The library should have, in my view, the reputation as the research centre of the school. You've got that academic authority. You've got all your resources organised in a way that embodies knowledge, and so that it's the natural home of project-based learning. And if it isn't there, something can be found. Now, Rob, you've talked about to me about open access and collection development. Some schools can afford lots of subscriptions and resources, but open access is also a possibility. Perhaps you can talk to us about some of the stranger resources that you've been asked to source as a librarian.
I mean, every single year. I mean, and Alice Smith School, just to put numbers into perspective, before COVID, and so our year groups were in the sixth form were just over 100. So before COVID, we would have had 50 or 60 students electing. It was an elective to elect for the EPQ. After COVID, we dipped down to only just over 20. And then over the last few years, it's built back up to being around the 50 number again. But I mean, every single year, there are going to be topics which are going to challenge any library system, particularly any school library system. And I wouldn't want to give lots of examples, but one I supervised myself, not this year, but last year, was a student who was doing a artifact project on developing a proposal for a prosthetic arm for swimming. And to be honest, there was nothing out there. There was really nearly nothing available to find. And that turned out to be a great challenge, where we had to reach out to people who were actually involved in the industry, because it wasn't just that I'm pretty sure, I say that as a librarian, I'm pretty sure it wasn't that we just couldn't find it. It really wasn't there. And therefore we had to reach out to people in the industry and to medics who would be relevant and to engineers who would be relevant to provide the academic background. So you can choose topics where there is nothing to be found.
That's really interesting. And John, what's the most off-the-wall subject that you were talking about eating EPQs as well?
Yeah, there's a lovely project a couple of years ago. A student who was very skilled in baking cakes and doing cake art essentially. So she explored the whole question of, is it food or is it art, and produced an extraordinary cake. It was. I mean, it really was a work of art, and we felt slightly awkward actually sort of cutting the cake at the EPQ exhibition. Enjoying it as well. So, I mean, that's there's probably a point of contrast here, I think, because whilst it's been interesting listening to the conversation about, can the extended essay broaden out and involve supervisors, as I mentioned, EPQ, because it's not limited just to written outcomes. We go very wide in terms of allowing for literally almost anything to be written, produced, made, built, designed, created, whatever. And I think but that in a sense creates the same question, because mentors, teachers, supporters get very anxious about, well, how do I support this process? And one of the key messages is that the basic underpinning, if you like, the structure of teaching and assessment, the model of learning, is very similar. Whether you're making an argument or making a cake, you still have to go through the same intellectual process of conceptualizing your objectives, your planning phase, your proposal phase, a research phase where you immerse yourself, whether it's in the academic literature or in the case of cake baking, maybe watching videos of other chefs at work, absorbing by osmosis their techniques and replicating it within your own practice and learning by doing. And then obviously there's a developmental phase, whether that's experimenting with different sort of ways of mixing your eggs and beating the mix, or creating different arguments, counter arguments in a written piece. And then there's a review phase at the end, and that reflection where you bring it together. That process, in EPQ terms, 1, 2, 3, 4. Once a mentor or a librarian or a teacher grasps that, they really can. I would argue you can supervise any project or any essay.
Fantastic. So I think there's things to draw in parallel there, which might be interesting for the extended essay schools, the IB schools. One very interesting point that Pedro made when we were talking about this seminar was he would encourage librarians to be entrepreneurial. And I wondered what he meant by that. And as we went into it, I could see connections being made to what we were talking about earlier on in the year of extending the library's influence. And this is a perfect example of how you can extend the library's influence, promote the library as a leader, as a lead supporter, to be visible in supporting the either the extended essay or the EPQ or whatever, because you're the natural home of it. And what it reminded me of was something of the stuff that I used to get involved in training sessions, going back to the idea of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which I think remains still unsurpassed as an analysis of how you can actually promote a culture in a school of people who have the right kind of habits. And the 2 of the habits that I was reminded of when Pedro was talking about that was recognizing your circle of influence. In other words, look at who you can help, helping them, and then your circle of influence grows because you've helped them. They will say, wow, that was just great. And your circle of influence extends because people talk to each other about the role that you've played. Rob, have you seen that in action at school at all, the way that might happen?
Well, I would like to think that if it was not a word I would have thought of using, but I think we have, at Alice Smith School, I think we were, as library, we were entrepreneurial in terms of wheedling our way into the whole EPQ hierarchy and infrastructure, because sure, I was on the EPQ supervisor team, but I was also part of the taught element team, and that makes a big difference. So because I was doing the obvious things, talking about how to access resources, what resources are potentially available, citation and bibliography, and writing a literature review and all of those types of things. But by being one of the people who was actually standing up in front of the cohort as library and actually being part of that delivery, empowered us. It made them realize what a central point we were for actually supporting their EPQ. So, and I could say a lot more about that, but that I think is super important. If you can become part of that delivery team for taught element, it improves the profile of library for research immensely.
I think it's really interesting, and it brings us on to the next one, which is coordination, very nicely, because John, in our conversations, you've talked about learning by doing, becoming a project mentor and supervisor. All these things here are about cultivating that relationship, extending your influence, getting the library profiled as the process goes through to grow the position of the library, which we've talked about political influence within the school. And with political influence, you get more resources, you get more support from the leadership team, and so on and so forth. So there's a number of things you can do by way of getting involved. And John, perhaps you talked about the very useful idea of the librarian becoming involved, just like Rob's been talking about, as a mentor, a supervisor, or whatever. And it's learning by doing, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I think the again, a phrase I've used in the past is Socratic mentoring, whereby, you know, Socrates is sort of inspiration for all of us who believe in an open pedagogy. You know, famously claims to know nothing, but just to be very good at asking the right questions. And as anyone who's done any work with learners doing projects knows, it's all about momentum. You have to help them just keep going, whether it's over the course of weeks, months, or even years. The conservation of their momentum is the most important role, I think, of the mentor, because once they slow down, their project's always the first thing that will be put on the back burner when they're very busy with their other courses. And suddenly they're demotivated and they're wondering why they're doing it. So keeping them moving is key, and whether that's just asking them the right question to help them discover a new source, or even just to realise that they can access other specialists who can provide the specialist input. I think that's so valuable. And of course, anybody with an interest, a general intellectual interest, can ask good questions, regardless of whether they are that subject specialist.
That's really interesting. And of course, if they don't know where to find their supervisor because they're out amongst, you know, teaching or doing something, they know where to find the librarian generally, and they can go and ask. Olive, do you find kids coming into the library and asking you about things and for support?
Yes, the students do show up every other time. They usually want to know where to find information. Usually the library is in charge of the research databases, and these resources are easily, you know, to just help them navigate all this, and also help them write things like how to do a bibliography properly, how to do their research ethically. So stuff like that keeps them coming back. And yes, we keep talking as the process keeps going on.
So you're visible, you're accessible, and they build their confidence in coming to you, which brings me to Pedro's EE calendar. And this is how they do it at Markham College. And he sent me a couple of infographics illustrating their year, which I'll send on to all members and put it up on the website. But he has some showpieces which I would love to attend. I mean, I would love to attend their Dragon's Den pitch. Now, this is where the kids are at the beginning of the process, and they're wondering what sort of ideas, what sort of questions, and they're asked to get up in front of people and pitch ideas. Is that something that an idea you've come across? Anybody, Rob or John or Jane or Olive?
Yeah, we do it. They have to. We do work with them, you know, to set up their focus for their extended essay, and then we have an afternoon where they have to defend. So they have staff come on board. They've got to defend, you know, what they're doing and why they're doing it, and they do it in a group with one teacher and a few students together with similar projects. And then so we then look at it, you know, in terms of that critical analysis, in ways where there may be problems and so forth. They've got to defend why they want to stick with them. They'll often will go away and make changes as a result of that defense process at the beginning. And it's been a really good way of being able to help them focus on, you know, where they want to go before they get too far into it.
That's interesting. I mean, before they get too far into it, before they've gone down a rabbit hole that they can't get out of.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. And he also talked about an IB core day after 3 months or so. Do you have that as well?
We do that. We do a couple of half days, and they do carouseling actually. So they'll go around to different focuses, and I'll be part of that carousel so that they'll all come to me at some part of the morning. And where I'm there, not necessarily doing anything, but they've always got the questions that they sort of haven't bothered to come to me and ask.
Yes.
And so I always find that in every group that comes to me, maybe not so much the maths kids, but there's always, very busy, and often have a few kids at once and busily kind of sorting out research questions. And it does then flow through to them coming back, when they can see what I can do, they'll come back to me by themselves. So it's a really, really useful day. We have a couple of them across our
Perhaps I could just ask you and Olive, do you use the term IB Core Day? And if you do, what does it mean?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I think we might use Core Day. I can't remember. But it means it's a day for our students they've actually got to continue. They've got to actually have a certain number more words written by the end of that day. So that'll be part of the carousel as well. So they've got particular objectives to meet, but they also have the chance to talk to, various experts.
So you're available and you're focused on those things. Yeah. I suspect what Pedro means is this is a whole day given over to the IB core, whereby they can really, I'm not sure. I think, TOK, extended essay, service projects and so on. Olive, do you have anything like that in Kampala?
Yes, we definitely do. But we have an IB coordinator here, the coordinator of the actual DP program. So he's the one who normally does that. He is on top of it, and is the one who runs the calendar and sets the calendar. But yes, we do have one of those. But particularly for the EE, which is the extended essay, just leave everything there, which is the extended essay. Sorry, I have students around me. We usually, they usually, for this year when it happened, it was a whole day that was picked for the students. That is the final students. That's the DP2 students, year 13s. They sat in the library the whole day with the DP coordinator, who was still the one who was running as EE coordinator. He was doing everything as one. So he sat through everything and looked at their essays and did the checklist, of course, after the supervisors had gone through with them whatever they had to go through. But yes, we do have an EE core day, and then we have what we call a drop-down day. Yes.
Drop-down day. And yes. I love the idea of the carousel, Jane. And I'm not quite sure that the carousel is something that the other schools, John or Rob, does. I'm not sure. But Jane, could you just, who's on the carousel? Who do they go around and see? And it's
all the supervisors. They get time, they get time to see their supervisors. They get time to talk to me. I'm not quite sure because I focus on my part of the carousel on that day. We also do one of the core days where it's when their TOK commentaries for their exhibitions are just about due. They have to then do an exhibition, and at the same time, it's a core day where they actually have to show how they're progressing with their extended essay and what their focus and how they're doing with their CAS as well. So we do a half day for that. So ours tend to be half days throughout the year. Focus on the core subjects. Yeah.
And the normal timetable is suspended, and you can just focus on these things. Rob, you were nodding through that. Have you done something similar?
No, but I mean, Alice Smith School being an A-level school, there would have been nothing equivalent to that core element of the IBDP. I mean,
yeah.
I think if I can digress a little, Andy, because going back to something that John said earlier, which I thought was so important, and that is that, and this is more of a supervisor thing than a library thing, but having sympathy with the pinch points in the rhythm of the learner's year.
Yeah,
I think it's so important as a supervisor that they know that you understand and care about the pressures that are on them, and it makes it easier for them to temporarily step down from their EE or their EPQ, and then subsequently re-engage if we show that we understand. Okay, we know about your internal exams, we know about higher education week, we know about trips week and all of those other things. Because quite often it's the EEs go, sorry, the EPQs for me seem to go wrong when the students have been going well, but something stalls them and they fail to re-engage.
Yeah, interesting. John, as an EPQ long timer, is there anything you've been listening to that Jane and Olive have been saying about the carousels and stuff that you think you might be able to pick up?
Yes, I mean, we're just looking at our whole curriculum model at the moment, actually, and thinking about introducing elective courses. And obviously, one option there under consideration would be to include some collapsed timetable times. We do it with EPQ towards the end of the course. In fact, next week, as they reach their deadline, we clear their whole morning just so they can have a full go at wrapping up their project. And then we have obviously we have a window for presentations, and we build in some exhibition slots when they can show their work to other students. You know, that's part of the culture. So yeah, just to sort of one sort of from my side, a concluding thought really is just to encourage all librarians. You know, I think for me the fascinating thing about talking about extended project, extended essay side by side is the depth of commonality in terms of what we're trying to achieve with these qualifications. It supports what I've always believed, which is that we are really driven by a conception of learning that's independent, that's project-based, that's inquiry-driven. And really, you know, any one of us, I'm sure, would agree that this isn't something that's particular to any individual qualification. It's something we want to see spread across throughout schools, throughout the curriculum, across the age range at all stages. And so I would just encourage librarians, you know, to see yourselves as, you know, depending on your metaphor, pioneers, leading the charge, winning the war, sowing the seeds. You can use more or less military metaphors, but just conquer the ground or claim the ground. Go and spread the idea, because it doesn't. The penny doesn't always drop that students don't necessarily click. That they've learned how to learn, and once they can apply that to their other subjects, that's so powerful.
Yes, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And the idea of that Rob was saying about being sensitive to how they're changing, the various pressures they're under, the pinch points, if you like. I mean, setting that in context, which is where we started, and knowing when they're going to need more support and when the right kind of support that they will get will be to ask a question back, reflecting that you know that they know ways of going about it. So again, increasing your authority and so on. So setting that in context. Interesting to draw together the commonality as well, John, which I think is absolutely right. When I go and observe in different schools, I see things in common. Yeah, things are done differently because you've got different protocols and so on. But at base, we're all doing the same thing for the same kind of reason. I'm just going to move on. And of course, curation, I put curation, citation, cheerleading, and celebrating. So it's a constant interaction that you guys are involved with, your visible targets, if we're going to continue the military metaphors, and you can be found and you can give access. And there is work for you guys to be done all the time. I want to focus a little bit on something that all three of you, John and Rob and Pedro, have mentioned, and that is the literature review and how important that is. Can you just talk us a little bit about what a literature review is, John, and then perhaps we can then round off the session.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Andy. So if we go back to what I was saying about my generic model of learning, planning, researching, developing, reviewing, a literature review is a very obvious way of expressing the outcome of a research process. It's not the only way. I mean, a student who's working on a creative artifact might do a more immersive piece with artist studies and something more creative and more practical. But certainly for anybody who's writing, the literature review is often the foundation of a successful essay or project. And as the name suggests, it involves immersing yourself in the literature. I think of research as a sort of two-level process. There's the gathering of information, the selecting the sources, the gathering up of the materials, and then there's the processing of that, the analysis, the synthesis, the argument, the analysis and evaluation of the materials. And the key with a literature review is for them to move beyond just bluntly finding a few websites, putting them in a document with some changed words. I mean, that would be a very low-level research process for someone at this stage.
And would the literature be more secondary sources, you know, synthesized sort of ideas from experts?
Personally, I would encourage them to use secondary literature. Primary research carries with it extra questions and challenges, and it's best done only under very carefully controlled circumstances as a rule, because typically, if not, all they do for primary research is to ask their friends a few questions, and it doesn't have high validity as a research tool. So whereas secondary literature, well, you know, even from the start, there's no reason why they can't go onto JSTOR or Google Scholar and then find a few research papers, and off we go.
Yeah, thanks very much, John. And Rob, you've done sort of planned support events to help people, kids and supervisors, with the idea of the literature review.
Yeah, I mean, within the taught element, one of the sessions over the last, probably only over the last 5 years, but we sort of put increased pressure or emphasis that a literature review was a worthy thing to include in your EPQ. I mean, again, of course, we don't tell people where to exactly put it, but I would say that the majority of students would be writing with their introduction coming first, their literature review following, and then on into the body of the research. We're running out of time, but something that students are, of course, have become aware of is that there are AI sources that are available to start doing this for you, the likes of Elicit, and there are lots of them out there now. And again, for me, I think you have to swing with these things. So I would actually, even as I taught, I would say, look, there are the likes of Elicit, and I would show them what Elicit would do and how it would produce a good structure for a literature review. But you know, probably not using, you can't use the sources that the AI would throw up, because you probably can't access them yourself. But it's a good framework to build on for your literature review.
Interesting. Thanks, Rob. And as you said, we are running out of time, and we've spent an hour and a bit in one of the most interesting conversations that I've been involved with about this topic. And I hope I've certainly learned a huge amount. So I'd like to thank Pedro in absentia for all the contributions he made. And I'll be sending on, with his permission, his EE handbook to everyone, which is a work of art apart from anything else. And his infographic about the extended essay year, tremendous piece of sort of information and a resource. Rob, thank you. John, thank you. And Jane and Rebel and Olive, thank you for joining us. I hope that has been useful, and that we'll see you all again next year, because this is the last session of the year. We are very much hoping to carry on into the new year. Spread the word, please.
Yes,
and I hope that you find these sessions useful.
Extremely useful, yes. It's so many gems to take away. Yeah, we do need to spread the word and get more people, because we'll get more gems then, won't we?
We will get more gems, and it's the gems that are coming in from our members, and we're all members here. Cran is a member, Compila's a member, you're a member at Dulwich, and you know, it's just fantastic to have you. So I'll say cheerio. We'll be in touch. Sal and I will be touching base very soon. Thank you once again to John and Rob. Thank you, Olive and Jane, and see you soon.
That brings us to the end of this final BISLN webinar of the year. And what a valuable session it's been. We've explored some really insightful ideas, from rethinking how we assign supervisors to creative approaches like Dragon's Den style project pitches and the use of AI tools to support literature reviews. We've also touched on the importance of recognising the pinch points in students' academic calendars, setting aside core or drop-down days for extended project work, and throughout, the key role librarians play in supporting independent research. A huge thank you to Andy, who led this session and throughout the year has guided us through so much learning. Thanks as well to absolutely everyone who's contributed across the series. I've thoroughly enjoyed co-delivering these webinars, and it's been fantastic to see how much thoughtful sharing has taken place. As we wrap up for the year, I encourage you to reflect on how the BISLN network has supported your own work. On this members site, you'll find a wide range of resources, from planning your library year to running effective primary and secondary sessions, to designing your own library space and developing library plans that get approved. I'll be available over the summer through our usual channels, so please don't hesitate to get in touch. Keep the ideas flowing. And Andy and I both look forward to reconnecting in September. Thanks again and have a great summer.